I think Bart Ehrman will say that the punishment for the crucifixion wasn't actually just dying on the cross, but it was actually having your body displayed up there and decaying.
And then what about Josephus saying that the Jews used to take the bodies off the crosses and bury them before the sun going down? Or Philo saying that in Egypt on the emperor's birthday, they would take bodies off the cross and bury them. Or the fact that we found this guy named Johanan with a spike in his ankle showing that he was crucified, yet he had a proper burial because he was in a burial box. So we have a bunch of evidence to show that the crucified victims did get buried at times.
Yeah, sure.
So but I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's a great case of just having this modern bias going, well, I don't think the Romans would have allowed Jesus to be buried. And then we go look all this evidence to show that, no, they did allow people to get buried.
Firstly, I said I don't know.
You're about to see an aggressive but jovial exchange between Michael Jones, a Christian, and David McDonald, an atheist, on the Deep Drinks podcast on claims for the resurrection versus claims of alien abduction and claims within Mormonism. Now, it is a hilarious discussion, but you got to stick with it right to the end, because toward the end, Jones is going to explain something about some of his atheist debaters and how they're biased when it comes to the evidence in a really unexpected way. So you'll need to stick with it to the end to get to that, but let's jump in now as they talk about alien abduction.
Okay, all right. So let's just take that. I'll tentatively say, okay, we can trust those testimonies. Okay, are there any other testimonies that you don't trust? So what about like first-hand accounts of alien abductions?
What about them? Like,
there are thousands more, and people you can still talk to today who have had alien abductions.
Sure.
And testimonies from multiple people who testified to the same thing.
That they encountered some sort of non-human beings?
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you believe them?
At the end of the day, I could be perfectly fine saying that we have sufficient evidence that they encountered something.
Okay.
So in terms of what they are, I'm not willing to say, because those beings did not tell us directly. People interpreted. But with Jesus, we have him basically saying, I rose from the dead. And he told
we have people
disciples.
writing that, but we also have these people who tell us about aliens saying, these aliens told me they're from Venus's...
So this is where we start evaluating testimony based on what we get. So... we start looking at the quality in terms of testimony. Are these people that are doing alien encounters, are they writing in a culture that is going to not persecute them, praise them, give them the fame they want? Yeah, that's going to make me a little skeptical. Meanwhile, the disciples are in a very hostile Jewish community. They want them to shut up. They're persecuting them. Paul's letters talks about this.
I don't know if you've met any alien abduction people, but like people move away from them on the bus. Like, then I'm not saying they have the same plight as the Hebrews, but I'm saying that like, if I met someone who was like, I was abducted by aliens, I was like, cool story, I'm going this way. Like, and like, I wouldn't be someone who I want to engage with, but there are a lot of people who do have those experiences.
Mm-hmm. And there's an entire community willing to praise them and help them and get them growing, and they're not being thrown to the lions or being stoned like Stephen, for example.
Yeah. I guess so. In some cultures, they might be. But all right, okay, let's say you don't accept the aliens, all right? Okay, what about the golden plates for the Book of Mormon? 12 eyewitnesses, some who left the church, who said they saw the plates and never recanted that they saw the plates.
Why did they leave the church?
Because they disagree with Joseph Smith's doctrine.
Oh, okay, interesting.
But they still believe that they saw the golden plates.
Spiritually?
No, physically and spiritually.
They said they saw them in a vision.
Physically and spiritually. There were different accounts. There's 12 accounts. And these are people who are 100 years, 200 years ago.
All right, we're going to jump right back into this clip, so don't go anywhere. But in case you're lost, Michael Jones, the Christian, is just trying to show what's at stake for those who claim to have seen the risen Christ and committed their lives to that versus what's at stake for alien abduction claims. I mean, these Christians were in an in-group, out-group, honor-shame society, and now they were on the outs when it came to the Jews. They were on the outs when it came to the Greeks. They were on the outs with everyone. They had to face the possibility of persecution and death, and some of them did die. People will live for something they know isn't true, but they won't die for something that they know isn't true. And on the other hand, when it comes to alien abduction cases, these folks may seem weird to some people, but they're not going to be persecuted or killed for what they believe. In fact, they might even become internet famous. Now, when it comes to Mormonism, they're disagreeing about what the claims of early Mormons actually were, but now things are about to turn as Jones takes it in a different direction, and we're coming to that big clip, so stay with it and watch.
I love when atheists do this because basically you're trying to argue that, look, you believe in this supernatural or this divine event from 2,000 years ago. Let me compare it to these other divine events. At the end of the day, you're just making a great case that atheism or naturalism has to be false because all these divine events are occurring.
No,
and that just becomes a conversation between me and Mormons.
No, I'm asking you, if you say that there is a testimony, right? There's testimony that we can trust that was written 30 years after the fact in a language that Jesus didn't speak.
He spoke Greek.
You think Jesus spoke Greek?
Yes. I did a whole video, did Jesus speak Greek?
Okay. So beyond that point, 30 years after the fact, written in a language, written in Greek, right? Mm-hmm. Sorry, written in a language. 30 years after the fact, written down.
I can't believe it was written in a language, guys.
what Jesus said and did and everything. And you think we can trust that because it was written down, right?
Not just because it was written down. There were other reasons.
Testimonies, yeah. So I'm asking you, okay, do you apply that same acceptance for the Book of Mormon and the plates?
Yes.
So you accept that there was a golden plate?
No, I think there's some problems there. For example, the golden plates say things that are...
I know there's problems there. There's problems in the story of Jesus.
Okay. Then we talk about the different problems and see if one is bad or one is good or vice versa. And we see where we come to. You're trying to generalize too much. You're trying to say, well, how could you accept this and not this? I'm saying we take this at a case-by-case basis. I've always said we take claims like this on a case-by-case basis. We don't just generalize.
Sorry. No, okay. Sorry.
I feel like that's a basic fact of life.
No, okay.
I love this guy.
It's hard because anything that I bring up, you're just going to say different cause, right? Like if I say Satya Sai Baba, and like you can talk to people who said, yeah, he raised my buddy from the dead, Radha Krishna, right? There's 3 or 4 testimonies you can read from people in the 50s who were raised from the dead by Satya Sai Baba.
Okay. I don't see how this has anything to do with the resurrection at the end of the day.
If you're not accepting, if their testimonies aren't sufficient to warrant belief and you can talk to them today, why is the testimonies of Jesus written 30 years plus 30 years after the fact, which have contradictions in them, why are they trustworthy?
Because it's about, again, going back to case-by-case basis, the type of testimony, the various factors associated that we evaluate to see if they're true or not. So there are So, for example, if you're going to say to me, like, yeah, I've been to the U.S., I might be a little skeptical of that because I don't even know if you've been to the U.S. But if, like, Dan says he's been to the U.S., I'm going to be like, yeah, he has, because he's got good evidence to show he's been to the U.S.
Sure.
So, again, I don't just go, well, if you've not been to the U.S., then Dan Patterson didn't go to the U.S. That's too much generalizing. Instead, we go case-by-case basis depending on the person and what they're presenting. This is what you do in a court of law. Witnesses are judged based on what they present. We don't go, well, this witness was clearly lying, therefore with the next witness you're going to bring out must also be lying.
All right, so the next clip you'll see is where Michael Jones claims that some of his debaters are biased and shows why in a unique way. So we're going to come to that. But what we just heard was so common. It's so common for skeptics to say, well, you Christians don't believe the supernatural experiences of these Mormons. You don't believe the supernatural experiences of these Hindus. So why should we believe your supernatural claims? Well, here's the thing. This misses the point. We don't necessarily dismiss the supernatural experiences claimed by Mormons or Hindus. When it comes to a Mormon who experiences what they call the burning in the bosom, which is supposed to be like an internal testimony from God that Mormonism is true, I don't deny that they had some sort of a supernatural experience. I don't question the validity of that. I question the source of that and whether that supernatural source can be trusted. Same with many other religions. And you say, yeah, but they say the same thing about you. That's right. That's why I don't point to my own supernatural experiences as the reason others should believe that Christianity is true. At least it's not the only thing. I want to point to the publicly available evidence that we've been discussing. And it's to that evidence that Jones says some of his debating partners have been biased as atheists, and we're going to see why right now.
You're describing what I think scholars do, which with the life of Jesus. Was there a person named Jesus? Probably. Mm-hmm. Was he crucified by the Romans? Probably. Was he? Are there stories about him being put into a tomb? Yes. Was he resurrected? Well, a lot of them will start to disagree there.
Why?
I don't actually know the reasons why they might disagree, because I think Bart Ehrman will say that part of the punishment for the crucifixion wasn't actually just dying on the cross, but it was actually having your body displayed up there and decaying.
And then what about Josephus saying that the Jews used to take the bodies off the crosses and bury them before the sun going down? Or Philo saying that in Egypt on the emperor's birthday, they would take bodies off the cross and bury them. Or the fact that we found this guy named Yohanan with a spike in his ankle showing that he was crucified, yet he had a proper burial because he was in a burial box. So we have a bunch of evidence to show that the crucified victims did get buried at times.
Yeah, sure.
So but I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's a great case of just having this modern bias going, well, I don't think the Romans would have allowed Jesus to be buried. And then we go look all this evidence to show that, no, they did allow people to get buried.
Firstly, I said I don't know. And then I said I think Bart Ehrman says this, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't making a case. I was just kind of going like, okay, maybe. But that's still, even if you can make a case for it, I would still say I don't know if it's sufficient to warrant belief.
And that he was buried?
Oh no, that he resurrected. Like,
okay, well,
I could, but maybe that he was buried. Like, if you were to say, was Jesus buried, and that was the whole question, I'd probably go like probably neutral. I'd probably go bang on neutral actually, because I just don't know enough about. Like, I don't know if we can like for example.
No, I've had 2 debates on just if Jesus was buried, and both times I was like, are you guys seriously denying this? Like, the evidence is overwhelming that he was buried, at least. And I love those debates for one specific reason. You know what it was? Is I'm always told, well, you only believe this because it supports your beliefs. Fine, let's have a debate on something natural, Jesus being buried. And I left both of those debates thinking my opponents were so biased against that.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, I'm the biased one.
Yeah.
I have all this evidence, and you can't believe Jesus was just buried in a tomb, but I'm the biased one.
Yeah.
Now, stay with me, because we need to fill in some things real quick right here at the end. So why should we believe that it's reasonable to believe that God raised Jesus from the dead? Well, let's go with what the historians and experts tend to agree about. Number 1, Jesus existed. Number 2, he was willing to die by Roman crucifixion and did. Number 3, the earliest followers of Jesus had experiences after his death that they took and sincerely believed to be appearances of the risen Christ. And then if you wanted to add more Christian gravy on top of this thing, guess what? The followers of Jesus took his message and turned the world upside down and built the ethics of the modern West on the back of the Judeo-Christian values that have led to Christianity as the #1 religion in the world. If you want more on that historical case, I would encourage you to click the video that's on the screen now, and thank you for watching.